Good morning and welcome to episode number 2 of In Bad Form. My name is Mark Levitt, and on today's podcast, I want to continue from the first podcast where I mentioned the trichia and the triune as being a very necessary part of me solving the paradox between the one and the many. I said I didn't want to mention it in that podcast because it would be too much to get into. I said that it would be a subject of its own, and today I would like to take on that subject. So today we will be discussing the triune, or more specifically the trichia, as I learned about it in the Buddhist tradition. But the triune is more of a general description of any type of trinity that could occur in any religion. The Buddhists have the trichia, the Christians have the Trinity, and every religion has a variation of a triune. The one that I was familiar with was the trichia. As I mentioned, that came from Buddhism, specifically Dzogchen. Today, you're not going to find much about the triunistic principle or the triunistic model. I did research it as I wrote my book to see what historically there was. And you're not going to find much if you look into the Christian Trinity or any other triunistic model. They're going to just chalk it up to a mystery. They're going to say that it's a mystery and not really go into it. I also see that the triunistic model exists in science, but no one's reported yet, so I'm not even sure if they're aware that it exists. But the trichia itself, that does exist as a source. I mentioned in my book that I learned about it from a book called The Wonders of the Natural Mind by Tenzin Wangyal. And even in that book, he only dedicates a few pages to the trichia. So I want to expand on it now during this podcast and explain what it is and how it helped me resolve the paradox between the one and the many, as well as resolving the paradox between mind and matter, or God and man, or more generally speaking, the absolute and the relative. So, as I said, I learned about the trichia through Dzogchen or Buddhism, but there was only a few pages of it, so I really had to meditate on it and contemplate this principle myself. And I would spend years contemplating what the trichia meant. I'd spend all day long from morning to night contemplating how the one could manifest as the many. And the trichia model basically set up the dynamic that everything in reality can be seen as either having, or not either, simultaneously having three aspects. The first aspect is just what it is, just its essence, its being. The second dynamic would be its action or its path, what the subject actually does. And the third dynamic would be the fruit or the result of that action. So that's it, basically. So for me, the way I saw this was a way that the one could manifest as the many. And the first symbol that I recognized as being a metaphor for the one manifesting as many, that would be the rainbow, to where you would have one being represented by the light, and the bending of the light would be the action, and the result of the bending of the light would be the appearance of a myriad of colors. So in this example, we have the one, which is clear light, pure light, manifesting as color because of the bending. So the color and the white light are actually the same thing, but the bending of the white light makes the white light appear to be a myriad of colors, the color spectrum. At no point are the colors not light. They just appear to be color. But simultaneously, the colors are pure light appearing as color, appearing as a multitude of color, when in actuality, they're pure white light. So that, for me, is the clearest example of how the one could appear as many. And I should go back a little bit, because all of this came from me trying to realize the source of reality. I wanted to figure out the source of reality, and I wasn't comfortable with creation. And the reason I wasn't comfortable with creation was because anytime you have creation, you could explain how something was created, but then you're left explaining how that thing that created it was created. So you really don't get anywhere looking at a creation story, because anything that you could name that created something is only going to beg the question of what created that. So that's why it's necessary to step outside of the dynamic of creation when you're looking to explain how this manifests, how reality appears. So that's the purpose of the Trikaya, of the trinistic model, to explain and to demonstrate so you could see for yourself how the one manifests as many. Now, the reason that I'm telling you about my process is because I don't want you to take any of this as true. I don't want you to take any of this as a statement of fact. Anything that you take to be true should be verified for yourself. For myself, the only thing that is true is that I don't know anything. Everything that I'm just reporting to you are just my experiences as best as I could understand them myself. And then it's up to you to decide what resonates. But my process for seeing the trinistic model is, as I mentioned earlier, a mixture of meditation and contemplation. I would go through a process as I was living out in the mountains. I mentioned in the first podcast, we moved out in nature, and I would spend hours out in the forest just being taught by nature, just looking at the trees and the twigs and the river and the grass, and everything was just showing me how reality was an expression of the absolute. All of the myriad things were showing me how they were an expression, a manifestation of the absolute. And through that process, I started to go through a cycle. And the cycle would, let's say it would start with a basic trust, in reality, and the trust would deepen to the point that I was able to surrender to reality. And after surrendering to reality, it would result in an insight, a deep insight about reality. And that insight would furthermore provide more trust to reality, which would encourage me to surrender more, which would result in a new insight. And this new, deeper insight would once again provide more trust, which would result in the desire to surrender, which would result in a deeper insight. And this process just played on infinitely, well, for years. It went on for years as I'm looking in the mountains. And as my understanding evolved, I started to understand that the origin of reality is this. The actual origin of reality is what is actually here now. What is actually present right now is actually the origin. We are actually witnessing the origin, the base, the path of what reality is, and the fruit itself, all simultaneously. And I realize that sounds illogical, so that's why I want to start from the beginning. So anytime that you're looking for a original cause or a first cause of reality, you're going to find that any cause is taking place in time. And so therefore, whatever caused that would, need an explanation of what caused that. So the only thing that could truly be the origin or the supreme source of our reality would have to be timeless. It would have to be eternal. It would have to be measureless. It couldn't be bound by time. Otherwise, like I said, we would just go back in circles of, well, what created that? So the only dynamic that could possibly be the first origin, the original, would have to be something that is eternal. And when we look at our experience, when we look at our world, we're going to find that the only thing that is measureless or eternal is awareness, is the awareness that we're experiencing the world with, experiencing these thoughts and sounds and colors. And if you examine awareness, you're going to find that it has no beginning. It has no shape. It has no form. It has no beginning. It has no end. It's the only thing that we could point to that is eternal, that's measureless. So if we're looking for an origin, if we're looking for a supreme source, awareness is the only possibility, because everything else is measurable. Everything else has a beginning. So once you study awareness, once you understand its qualities and recognize its eternal nature, its measureless nature, then the rest follows logically and actually necessarily. And the reason I say that is because the very nature of awareness is to be aware. That's what awareness is. What it is the capability to be aware. And since there was nothing else to be aware of, at least at this point in our discussion, awareness would have no choice but to be aware of itself. And this awareness of itself is the path that I alluded to earlier when I said that there's always going to be three dynamics: what it is, what it does, and what its result is, or what its fruit is. So we have awareness as what it is. What it is aware, and what it does is to be aware. Since there is nothing else to be aware of, it would have no choice but to be aware of itself. And this power, this active power of awareness, the sheer power of that awareness would necessarily cause awareness to bend in on itself or contract in on itself, contracting itself like a black hole. If you could picture a star imploding on itself, actually contracting within itself due to the power of attraction to itself. So the base of awareness is what it is. The path of awareness is to be aware, so it has no choice but to be aware of itself, therefore causing this black hole. And that's the fruit. So the fruit is this dynamic where now what was once just pure awareness, just aware, not aware of anything, just awareness, now, due to the power of its own self-attraction, its magnetic attraction to itself, that would cause awareness to be aware of itself, but as another. And that is the fruit. The fruit is the as, because awareness would be aware of itself, but itself as another. So you have awareness is what it is, aware is what it does, and awareness of awareness is its result. And that's what we call consciousness. Consciousness is what we refer to as being aware of something. Left alone, awareness is just undifferentiated. Pure undifferentiated awareness. Awareness before thought, awareness before movement, just awareness. But the moment awareness is aware of something, that's what we refer to as conscious. You're conscious of something. I'm conscious of this object, I'm conscious of my thoughts, I'm conscious of myself. Doesn't matter what you're conscious of. Once you're conscious, that means that awareness went from undifferentiated awareness to differentiated awareness, which is what we call consciousness. However, consciousness is only capable, or awareness, I should say, is only capable of being aware of itself as another. And that is how we get duality. That's the birth of duality. That's what I referred to my book as the virgin birth. I referred to it as the virgin birth just because it came from nothing. There's nothing. There's just awareness. Awareness is no thing. The attraction of awareness to itself is, again, no thing. It's a verb. It's a happening. It's a path. It's an action. It's not a thing. So you have awareness being attracted to itself, and the result of that bending of awareness to be aware of itself results in the appearance of another, and that's what I refer to as the virgin birth, because it's the birth of a world that came from nothing. But even the world itself is still nothing. It's still just an appearance. It's an appearance of awareness. It's an appearance of the Supreme Source. So the birth itself is miraculous. This world that we're looking at is miraculous. And the world that we're looking at, not only is it miraculous, but it mirrors the dynamic from which birthed it. And what I mean by that is, originally there's just awareness. The attraction of awareness to itself manifests as the reality, as duality, the world that we experience. Everything that we experience in the world is going to take on a quality of the dynamic that created it. So the dynamic that created it is what is it at its most essence? The essence is life. So everything in the dualistic world that we witness is going to be life. That's why everything that we see is life, because it's a reflection of awareness. How did life take on, or how did awareness take on the form of life forms? By the bending, by the attraction to itself. So that dynamic is going to take place in the world that created it. Everything that we see in the world is going to be created due to a magnetic attraction. Whether that magnetic attraction is male to female, resulting in the emergence of a child, or the magnetic attraction of stars, gravity, black holes, light, plants to light, everything is going to mirror this basic dynamic of attraction, magnetic attraction. Everything, like I said, from the plants following the light, from the boy following a girl, to the gravity bending, black holes, has no choice, because it's mirroring that which created it in the first place. Another dynamic that I find fascinating about the trianistic model is that it actually resolves the paradox between the one and the many, or I guess in religion they would call it the God versus man, or in science it would be mind versus matter. So basically, God and man are the same thing, and mind and matter are the same thing. The one and the many are the same thing. Generally speaking, we could say that the absolute is the relative, that the relative is the absolute. And this trianistic model shows how. It shows the relationship between mind and matter, between God and man, between the absolute and the relative, or between the one and the many. And the relationship between the absolute and the relative, or God and man, or mind and matter, is the bending, is this action, is this magnetic attraction. So we could start with mind versus matter. That mind and matter are actually the same thing. It's just that when mind bends, it appears as matter, or what we call duality, or the myriad of things. Or religiously, you could think about it as God and man, or God and individuals being the same thing. When God is just what it is, no bending, it's just God. When God bends as an attraction to itself, it appears as individuality, as the world we see. So the bending is actually what resolves the paradox between the one and the many. The one and the many are exactly the same thing, just dependent upon whether it's bent or not, or contracted. So the one contracted appears as the many, or the absolute contracted appears as the relative. It is the activity of the mind that makes it appear as matter. It is the activity of God that makes it appear as man. Another fascinating aspect of this I find is that at the root of awareness, it's actually more appropriate or more correct, more descriptive to, instead of to use the word simply awareness, to use the phrase aware space. And the reason I like to use the word aware space instead of just awareness, because awareness has, we could say there's two aspects. One, the active aspect of being aware, and the in aspect of just being the space, just being the capacity for existence. And it is the inseparability of the awareness in space that manifests as the world that we experience, the world of duality. And it is the attraction to itself that I refer to as the virgin birth. But a better visual that I want to give you to explain what I mean by how the one manifests as the many would be to start with an example of a stick. The stick would represent basically what it is. So for awareness, the stick would represent the potential. The path of the stick would be represented by an action of the stick, a bending of the stick towards itself to the point that the stick is rubbing against itself. And as the stick rubs against itself, interacts with itself, is attracted to itself so much that it just can't help but to rub up against itself, it would have no choice but to spontaneously emerge as fire. And the fire was potential within the stick all along. But it took that bending, that action, that contracting of the stick to transform itself into the emergence of the fire that was within it the whole time. So the is, the as, and the does, I referred to in my book as potential, attraction, and emergence. These are the three factors that explain the relationship between the one and the many, the absolute and the relative, or mind and matter, or God and man. So, potential, that would be, we could refer to the mind as just pure potential, or God as pure potential, or as the absolute as pure potential, or even the one as pure potential. It is the attraction to itself, the bending on itself, that is going to result in the emergence of the mind manifesting as matter, God manifesting as individuals, the light manifesting as the rainbow, the stick manifesting as fire, the one manifesting as many. They're all the same thing. All there is what it is, what it does, and what it manifests as. And I realize this is just a stepping off point. The whole reason for me bringing this up now is just an opening point, a dialogue, an opportunity to open dialogue, so you could ask questions and allow me an opportunity to expand more upon this. I did in my third book, The Trianistic Model of Reality. Obviously, it goes into great detail. But in this podcast, I want to open this up to you to ask questions. I just wanted to set the table and kind of explain basically what it is. This is the first time I've done this, by the way, without visuals. I really like to rely on visuals. If you look at the book, it's got a lot of charts and visuals that help you, but I realize that half the people are going to be listening to this on a podcast and won't have the visuals to look at. So the point of this talk was to say it all without any visuals and to start a conversation. I realize I didn't cover it all. I can't cover it all in the limited time that I'm giving myself now. But like I said, I want this to be a launching off discussion. I want this to be an opportunity for you to ask questions about it, poke holes in the theory, make me explain myself. So this is hopefully the last podcast I'm going to do by myself. I really enjoy the energy of talking with people and having other people bring out better questions in me than I have myself. So this is going to be the last time, hopefully, that you see me by myself. I want to start doing these podcasts with other people. So until then, please, my website is still not done. Hopefully it'll be done in a couple weeks, but it's still there. So if you want to leave a message on my message board, it's thisawarespace.com. Again, it's thisawarespace.com. And I'm just now starting to set up the community so people could leave questions, look at my podcast, the videos, and get more information. So thank you very much, and I'll see you for the next podcast in bad form. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.